The Jet K and N class was a class of 24 destroyers of the Royal Navy launched in 1938. They were a return to a smaller vessel, with a heavier torpedo armament, after the Tribal class that emphasized guns over torpedoes. The ships were built in 3 flotillas or groups, each consisting of 8 ships with names beginning with J, K, and N. The flag superior of the pennant numbers changed from F to G in 1940. The ships were modified throughout the wartime service, particularly their anti-aircraft guns. They were also fitted with radar. Design history. The design was intended as a smaller follow-in from the preceding Tribal class, and incorporated one radical new idea that was a departure from all previous Royal Navy destroyer designs. That was the adoption of a 2-boiler room layout. This reduced hull length and allowed for a single funnel, both reducing the profile and increasing the arcs of fire of the light anti-aircraft weapons. However, this also increased vulnerability, as there were now 2 consecutive large compartments with the resultant risk of a single well-placed hit flooding both and resulting in a total loss of boiler power. This illustrates somewhat the Admiralty's attitude to the expendable nature of destroyers. This is, of course, as opposed to the 3-boiler room layout that was used starting with the F-class in the early 1930s. Early ships also tended to use twin boiler rooms, which are still a great improvement over a single boiler room. In any case, destroyers are like the armored and fast vessels meant to survive by avoiding being hit at all. The odds of a single hit striking just the right spot to disable both boiler rooms simultaneously were considered remote enough to be worth risking, in exchange for the benefits given by a 2-room layout. During pre-war trials, on a light displacement Jackal attained 37.492 knots on the air and mile in 60 fathoms, 34.37 knots deep. Jupiter in 75 fathoms made 33.835 knots light, 33.045 knots deep displacement. A significant advance in construction techniques was developed by naval architect Albert Percy Cole. Instead of going for transverse frame sections which were unnecessarily strong, but held together by weak longitudinals, Cole went for extra strong longitudinals and weaker transverse frames. Another advancement was changes to the bow design. The bow form was also modified from that of the preceding Tribal class design, the clipper bow replaced by a straight stem with increased shear. This change was not a success, and as a consequence these ships were very wet forwards. This shortcoming was rectified from the S-class onwards by returning to the earlier form. Despite the vulnerability of the boiler layout, the design was to prove compact, strong and very successful, forming the basis of all Royal Navy destroyer construction from the O-class up to the last of the C-class of 1943 to 1945. The armament was based on that of the Tribals but replaced one twin QF 4.7 in Mark 12 gun on mounting CPMK 19 with an additional bank of torpedo tubes. These mountings were capable of 40 degrees elevation and 340 degrees of training. Curiously, X-mounting was positioned such that the blind 20 degrees arc was across the stern, rather than the more logical forward position where fire was obscured by the bridge and masts anyway. This meant that they were unable to fire dead astern. With the tubes now pented, a heavy load of 10 mk. IX torpedoes could be carried. Aaa armament remained the same, consisting of a quadruple QF2 PDR gun Mark 8 on AMK 7 mounting and a pair of quadruple 0.5 Invictus machine guns. Armament was further improved by replacing the quadruple machine guns with 20mm Helicons. These ships, when completed, had a comparatively heavy close-range Aaa armament. Fire control arrangements also differed from the tribals, and the dedicated high-angle rangefinder director was not fitted. Instead, only a 12-feet rangefinder was carried behind the usual direct control tower. In the event, the rangefinder was heavily modified to allow it to control the main armament for AA fire, and was known as the three-man modified rangefinder. These ships used the fuse-keeping clock half-hour control computer. The N-class were ordered in 1940 as repeats of the J design, after delays and cost overruns associated with the larger and more complicated L and M class. The only design change was to locate the X4.7-INCH mounting in the more logical position with the 20 degrees training blind spot forward, while building the same early wartime modifications as the J's and K's were applied, with a pair of twin-power-operated 0.5-in machine gun turrets briefly carried on the quarterdeck before being replaced by single 20mm Helicons. Modifications in 1940 and 1941 to improve the anti-aircraft capabilities. All ships had their aft torpedo tubes removed and replaced with a single 4-inch gun QF Mark V on a Ha Mark III mounting. The relatively ineffective multiple 0.5-INCH machine guns were replaced with a single 20mm Helicon, with a further pair added abreast the searchlight platform amidships. The high-speed destroyer minesweeps were replaced with a rack and two throwers for 45 depth charges, and a Type 286 radar air warning was added at the masthead alongside Type 285 fire control on the HA rangefinder director. In 1942 the 4-in gun was removed and the torpedoes returned to all surviving vessels. The 20mm Helicons were replaced with twin mountings, and a Type 291 radar replaced the Type 286. Jervis, Kelvin, Narissa and Norman had the searchlight replaced with the lantern for centimetric target indication radar Type 271, Javelin and Kimberley having the lighter Type 272 fitted at the truck of the foremast. Napier, Nism and Norseman had American SG-1 radar fitted at the head of a new lattice foremast, Norman replacing her Type 271 set with a single 40mm Bofors gun. By the end of the war, the surviving J and K ships carried a lattice mast with a Type 293 radar target indication at the truck and a Type 291 air warning at the head. Service. Being amongst the Royal Navy's most modern and powerful destroyers at the outbreak of war, they were extensively committed. As a result, losses were heavy, and of 24 ships built, 6 J, 6 K and 1 N class were lost. Ships equals flotilla leader. J-class, K-class, N-class. Note: the N-class destroyers of the Royal Australian Navy were manned and commissioned by the Australians, but remained the property of the British government.